Hello and welcome to our brand new series, Funny You Should Ask. In the spirit and the vein of Nick Knacks, which is a fantastic retrospective on the entire content library of Nickelodeon, and I absolutely recommend you go check that out, links in the description, I decided to pick a different channel and go through its entire history. Now, in selecting a channel, I wanted to make sure that the list of shows was fairly diverse, despite the overall theme of the channel, and with that being said, I selected Comedy Central. In Comedy Central's 30-plus year history, the show has had nearly 400 different television programs, plus loads of movies and specials. Now, before we get started, some ground rules. I will be attempting to at least cover every single show that ever aired on the network. However, not every show is going to get its own episode, and that's mainly down to the fact that a lot of the shows are early ones for which either little or no footage exists, or are just simply stand-up comedians showcasing their comedy sets, which would be a very boring discussion. Hey, here's another show about comedy and people doing comedy. I mean, yes, it's interesting and it's fun, but really not a whole lot to talk about on those. Obviously, the one exception will be Comedy Central Presents, because that was a signature show for Comedy Central. There will be a couple of shows that are stand-up shows that are like that. Now, for shows that don't need a full episode, they'll be featured in episodes with bigger programs as what I will be calling laugh sidetracks. Okay, now that we've established parameters, we're actually going to begin the series with a two-part series premiere, covering the two networks that merged to form Comedy Central. What's the first of these two networks? Well, in order to talk about the Comedy Channel, we first have to start by talking about a man named Michael J. Fuchs. Fuchs, born in New York City to a real estate executive, started his career in entertainment law. In 1976, Fuchs joined up with a little startup network that had only been on the air a few years, but a network that would eventually become a force to be reckoned with. That channel was HBO. HBO was in its infancy when Fuchs came aboard, but he would remain with the network through its boom period and beyond, spending 18 years with the network, including 11 years as its CEO. During his time as CEO, specialty channels just popped up all over the place. You had channels like MTV, which was focused solely on music television, and you had channels like Nickelodeon, which was focused solely on children's programming, but there was not a comedy network. The niche of comedy, a rather large one, needed to be filled. So in 1989, the Comedy Channel was born.
The Comedy Channel. We have no motto.
The Comedy Channel. You laugh until you stop.
Comedy is our middle name.
The channel would be our last name, that's right. Yeah.
The Comedy Channel.
Three-dimensional programming on a two-dimensional screen.
Brought to you by a one-dimensional person. What the hell? Mottos come and go.
Comedy Channel. This isn't Russian.
But we're always there when you need us.
Get the picture?
The Comedy Channel.
The Comedy Channel. Funny. Free.
The Comedy Channel began airing on November 15th, 1989, and was full of low-budget originals and unconventional programs, some of which will get their own episode of Funny You Should Ask. There were also quite a few talk and variety programs hosted by stand-up comedians. Interestingly, something I associated with Saturday Night Live, but actually started as a part of the Comedy Channel, was Deep Thoughts with Jack Handey, which would eventually be part of SNL as a recurring segment.
And now, once again it's time for Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey.
The face of a child can say it all, especially the mouth part of the face.
I found it pretty interesting that something we so closely associate with one show wasn't even originally from said show, rather a completely different television network. Quick addendum to the Deep Thoughts with Jack Handey footage. So when I was doing the original research of the episode, I thought that the Deep Thoughts segments were originated from the Comedy Channel promos. However, I have since learned through some more research that in fact that is not the case. They actually started from a television show called Michael Nesmith in Television Parts, and the early ones were all narrated by Michael Nesmith before it went to Saturday Night Live, and it's those segments from Television Parts that aired in the Comedy Channel promos in the early days of that network. I say early days, I mean it was literally the entire 18 months it was around, but yeah, that was it. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got that correction put into this episode so that there wasn't a bunch of flames in the comments and arrows ready to hit me and be like, hey, that's not where that started. So yeah, just letting you know. Now, while the Comedy Channel was owned by Time Warner and HBO, their competitors at Viacom definitely noticed. Can't launch a comedy channel and not go unnoticed. So MTV Networks, and specifically executive Thomas Freston, put his head together with the heads at Viacom and came up with their own niche comedy channel, which launched in 1990. In fact, April 1st, 1990. April 1st is a very important date in comedy's history because it's associated with the launch of not only Ha, but 1 year later, Comedy Central itself. See, here's the deal. We're going to talk about Ha in the next episode because it is the other channel. But the gist of it is that both networks really weren't doing that well. They were kind of losing money, lots of it. They had multi-million-dollar budgets, but they weren't getting that back in subscribers. I think they only had a couple million subscribers each. I don't have exact numbers. I've tried to find them, but unfortunately, exact numbers really aren't available for both networks. But it wasn't enough to sustain both networks staying on their own. The solution? Put them together. The decision was made to merge the two networks, and on April 1st, 1991, Ha and the Comedy Channel merged to become CTV, the Comedy Network. Soon after that, due to not wanting confusion over Canadian broadcasting channel CTV, the network would be rebranded Comedy Central. Both channels' program libraries merged together, though some episodes didn't survive the merger. For the purposes of our show, we're going to start looking at Comedy Channel shows that survived into Comedy Central when it launched in 1991. We don't really need to start with Ha because Ha, which was owned by Viacom, eventually their parent company owns Comedy Central outright. And that's a few years down the line. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s that happens. So I don't feel the need to cover Ha's program library. I'd rather start with the program library from the competitor channel from HBO's Comedy Channel, and only the shows that survived into Comedy Central's birth. Ha's program library will be coming down the road, but we'll get to those when we get to the point where the merger happens, which will be probably a couple of seasons from now. It's at this point, by the way, that I have not a lot of information more about Comedy Channel, considering it was only technically on the air for 18 months, roughly. I can tell you a little bit more about Michael J. Fuchs, though, and what happened to him after he left HBO. In fact, in 1995, he was given the reins of Warner Music Group. However, that didn't last very long, as while he was trying to secure a higher position in the company, then CEO Jerry Levin saw him out the door with an incredibly generous severance package. I don't have exact figures, but everything I've done research on points to the tune of somewhere around $60 million. Holy crap, that's a lot of money. You think he'd never have to work again? Well, you'd be wrong. He was also a pivotal part of the early days of Nerve.com, even invested a bit into what would eventually become Friend Finder, a dating site. He also spent a lot of time bad-mouthing Jerry Levin, the man who took Fuchs' job away from him. Considering Levin's own career was blighted by the train wreck that was the AOL Time Warner merger, I'm sure Fuchs is reassured by that. That's going to do it for this edition of Funny You Should Ask. Now, I'm going to do my due diligence and try to do as much research as I possibly can on every show that I spotlight here on the show. And I'm going to try to do these episodes whenever I can, so You'll probably be seeing these fairly infrequently. I'm not going to try to get them on a regular schedule, but I make no promises because of how busy I am with other shows and also personal issues. Now, in the next episode, we're going to cover the other half of the merger, which was Viacom's Ha! Network and its executive Thomas Freston. Until then, I've been Michael Riley for Funny You Should Ask. See you next time.